Houston, Jeremy, what's happening?
Yes, the latest from our Field Yates. Two Texan stars, pass rusher Will Anderson, quarterback C.J. Stroud, are getting their fifth-year options picked up. That means they're under contract for 2026 and 2027. The Texans want to keep their core intact. They made 2 picks 3 years ago and have these 2 players in the fold. Expect some more money to be spent, possibly on Will Anderson, on a big contract in the future.
Well, because also this offseason, Jeremy, as you know, the Texans locked down Danielle Hunter on a 1-year extension. They traded for Lions running back David Montgomery. They reworked the offensive line again. Houston holds the 28th pick in the draft, coming off 3 straight divisional round losses under DeMeco Ryans. And Lewis, we have talked about it ad nauseum, but just to remind people, C.J. Stroud, 5 fumbles against the Steelers, 4 first-half picks against the Patriots. It was just an absolute disaster. How do they move beyond their playoff woes?
Yeah, I think a lot of this obviously starts with CJ himself. Obviously, ball security, making good decisions, throwing football with accuracy. All of those kind of things are the kind of things that CJ is going to have to go back to the drawing board and really get into the film room and figure out why it was maybe that he took some chances with the football that he didn't need to. What does he have to do as far as making sure that the ball's coming out on time, that he's protecting the ball better in the pocket, and then, as a team, and as a front office, they got to make sure that this offensive line is straight. Look, they were 32nd in the NFL in run block win rate. That's just not, you just can't win that way. You cannot win with your offensive line being that inept. And they were bottom quarter in the league in pass block win rate. So you know that pass rush being under pressure is something that is going to unsettle even the best of quarterbacks. So I think that's first and foremost. On the defensive side, I think they need to continue to make a strong unit even stronger. They're going to need some depth on the inside. They're fine on the outside, obviously, with Danielle and Will. And, between CJ and Will together, they absolutely set the table for this franchise and turned things around back in 2003 when they were drafted number 2 and number 3. And it's great that they're exercising their fifth-year options. These guys are foundational players. But I think in this case of CJ, he has to go back to the drawing board and make sure that protecting the football is priority number 1 and not to repeat the mistakes that he did in 2025.
Man, and Booger, you're joining us just in time for this discussion. Really, when you talk about Houston's offensive line issues, these are going back not to last season, but also this season before. They tried to retool it last season. What are you seeing from these Texans that they need to get over this playoff hump?
Well, when you talk about retooling, I don't know if they did a good enough job when you trade away Larry Tunsil, one of the best left tackles in football as far as protecting the passer. This is a huge season coming up for the Houston Texans. I agree with Lewis on Will Anderson. I think he's a foundational piece. I think him and Danielle Hunter make one of the more formidable defensive end combinations in football. But the fact that you pick up the 5th-year option in your quarterback and you don't extend him, which, by the way, is not cost intuitive for the team, lets you know that they're not necessarily sold on C.J. Stroud. Because if they were sold on him, you go ahead and extend him now and you go ahead and get this deal done. I think the last 2 years of C.J. Stroud, if we really want to be honest, guys, he's regressed. They have to see him play more consistent football. Rookie year was absolutely outstanding, but I need to see more like the rookie year and less like the last 2 years. If you can do that, then this team starts to take the steps that we thought they could take last year, which is when you get into the playoffs, they had the best defense in football.
Right.
The best defense in football, and they didn't get the job done because the quarterback threw the football to the other team so many times. So I expect them to extend Will Anderson. They're going to beef up the offensive line so they can really evaluate C.J. Stroud, because they have to decide, is he the true franchise quarterback or do they need to move on?
Yeah, Jeremy, to that effect, you just heard what the guys said. Yeah. Are we looking at an extension for Anderson before CJ, or what's the word there?
Yeah, I'm told that Will Anderson Jr. is a major priority for the Houston Texans. I do expect Houston to pay him at some point this offseason. He's now eligible for a new deal. He's a premier player at a premier position for a premier defense. Now, the question becomes, is this a contract with a 5 in front of it on a per-year average? Because the market with Micah Parsons and those guys is well above $45 million a year. Can he get there? I'm not sure that he can get there, but it's going to be a really strong number. So I suspect they take care of Anderson. Certainly, they still believe in C.J. Stroud. They can get something done, but this is where a compromise would probably have to happen because Houston's trying to keep a lot of core guys together who are very costly, and we know quarterback contracts are crazy. So I suspect Houston will entertain a deal for CJ eventually, but they're going to have to find a sweet spot.
Yeah, kind of a prove it kind of year for CJ Stroud, to say the very least. All right, guys, moving on to somebody else who really wants some money. Giants star defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence not participating in the team's offseason program. He wants a new deal. Signed a $90 million contract extension in 2023. 2 years left on the deal. So we have some nice drama right off the bat for new Giants head coach John Harbaugh, who was asked about it yesterday.
Speaking for the Giants, we want Dexter here, and I believe Dexter wants to be here. You know, that's a good formula, but there's business involved. It's a business proposition. We know it's pro football, and these things happen every year, pretty much on every team. So, not surprised by it. Saw it coming a few weeks back, probably, and good conversations with Dexter's agent, Joel Siegel, and understood what they were thinking. And I talked to Dexter early a couple times when I first got hired. First few weeks, we had great conversations. But once it moved into this type of conversation, it got to be about business, and we knew it was going to be an issue. Joel's preference was that we talked through him.
This is up to Joe Schoen to get this done. I know his contract average is about 11th among interior defenders, right? So he has a point. What's the latest?
Well, the latest is Dexter Lawrence is not happy. John Harbaugh is downplaying things a little bit there. That's his job, to kind of quell the noise. But Dexter Lawrence, I'm told, has been trying to get a new contract for almost 2 years now. He's averaging on the last 2 years of his deal about $20 million per year. That's well below some of these top guys, even his younger players that are inferior to him. He feels like at 28 years old, he is still one of the very best. And so he wants this addressed, or he wants to be traded. The team has accepted the trade request, but they haven't shopped him. They don't want to have to move him, as you heard from John Harbaugh there. They'd like to try to find some sort of compromise. But there's going to be a robust market here. Teams are calling. I've talked to several executives of teams who say, heck yes, you want to get involved with Dexter Lawrence, because it's a very weak defensive tackle class in the draft.
Yes.
There might not be a first-round D tackle in Thursday's draft in a couple weeks. So that becomes a premium position for Lawrence for other teams trying to get one. It would require at least a first-round pick to even entertain it.
Big drop-off last year for him, only half a sack.
Yeah.
But can the Giants afford to lose him, Lewis?
No, he has a lot of leverage here simply because they're thin on the interior. They've got some dudes who can rush on the outside now. They've got some guys who can get after it. But look, number one, they were pretty bad against the run and up the middle last year. And without Dexter, what is your next best alternative? How are they going to address it? By the time it would come around for them to pick again, after their first pick overall is gone, in the fifth pick overall, how are they going to address this? How are they going to get anybody that is comparable to him? What is the next best alternative, like I said? And I think Dexter knows that. He also knows that he's right in the sweet spot, right in the prime of his career at 28 years old. He was 29 when the season starts. And as Jeremy said, he probably wants to be up there around $30 million per year. And this is a guy who was really, I think he was the second most frequently double-teamed interior pass rusher this year amongst all defensive tackles. So, look, he's helping everyone else out along that defensive line just by his mere presence in the season that he had in 2024. That's why people paid so much attention to him in 2025. He knows a lot of things are in his favor right now.